been with SCEDD over 2 years now. It's been just a blast. Some days it seems like yesterday, other days it seems like decades. But couldn't do what I do without Tracy, our program manager. And she, covers many of our counties, Huerfano County included. And Richard, who is our brand spanking new broadband coordinator. So save all your hard questions for Richard so we can look at the look on his face and go, what are you talking about? How long have it's been a month? Not even a month.
It's coming up on, I think tomorrow's 4 weeks.
Oh, there we go. So he's been learning SCEDD, learning our region, learning broadband. He relocated from eastern Illinois, western Indiana, right on the border there, so has some municipal experience, which excited me. And he has, I know it wasn't technically Purdue, but see, this is how I'm gonna wrap this all up.
Okay.
So he went to Purdue, which is where Drew Brees went to school. Sean Payton coached Drew Brees. Sean Payton is the coach of the Broncos. Anyway, that's that was it. That's a roundabout way, but I'm a football geek, so when I saw that Purdue and perked right up. But and then the other members of our broadband team are Ditesco, and I'm gonna get the names right. Keith and Paul. They've been with us for a little over a year now, and we've created some magic. Serious.
Done some good work.
We have done some good work. I'm going to tell you a little bit about SCEDD, because I don't want there to be assumptions on who we are and what we do. We're an economic development district. We serve or work in 13 counties in southern Colorado.
Is this it on the map?
That is it on the map.
Cool.
So we go clear over to the Kansas border, then up to Lake County, which is our northernmost county, and then all the way down to Huerfano and Los Angeles counties. We were designated an economic development district by the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration, or EDA, and they said you're going to assist these 13 counties in their economic development work. We work with counties, cities in the counties, economic development districts or corporations in the region, education, healthcare. We work with all the state agencies. Even veterans we do work with workforce, with DOLA, OEDIT, and most importantly for these purposes, the Colorado Broadband Office. So we, again, about a year ago-ish, we, SCEDD brought in Ditesco to help us develop a broadband blueprint to get a picture of where our region is regionally in the area of broadband, what our coverage was, and to identify what the region's needs were. And out of that, should I shut that? Is that troublesome? John, if it bothers you.
Yeah, it's not.
So out of that, we submitted applications for 7 different projects in our region. And truly, from Lake County all the way, we covered our region with these applications through the Capital Projects Fund, which was we applied to the Colorado Broadband Office, or CBO, and they had funds from the Department of Treasury, the Federal Department of Treasury, that were earmarked for broadband. Tied in with the COVID ARPA money. So different set of rules for those funds, pretty stringent guidelines as to what could and couldn't be funded. They set the priority, you know, these are gonna rank higher, these are gonna rank lower. We had 106, I'll just say 160 million the state did to work with for statewide applications. You don't have that graphic, do you? That's
Like
okay.
a breakdown of the.
Yeah,
financials.
it was just, it
It
was,
was about 160 originally.
For the broadband.
Yeah,
For broadband.
broadband.
Yeah.
Polis funneled it a little bit off for affordable housing,
Uh-huh.
and the rest of it, about 130 million is what
Yeah.
went to broadband.
and the requests were unbelievable. Probably 6 times what was available.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul has that slide.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible. We were fortunate, SCEDD was, where of the 7 applications we submitted, we received funding for 3 of them,
Awesome.
which the competitive part of me, all of them.
But you got 10% of the pot.
But I got
Yes.
10%, we got 10%.
Yes.
And John, who 2 of the projects are CCOM projects, he probably was going, okay, that's good.
We just need to chew this now.
We're
Let it
gonna-
swallow and then.
So as we are kicking off that, and Paul will talk about that a little bit in our timetable, we're looking forward to BEAD funding, which is the big pot, the 800 plus million, and who knows. That is still mid-early stages of gaining some momentum, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But probably most crucial, and the thing I want everyone to remember is we couldn't do what we do without the input and the cooperation of all of the stakeholders in the region.
Sure.
Your input is more important than anything. I don't know what it's like day to day in the broadband realm in Walsenburg or in Gardner or in the rural areas. So it's important for you to share that information with us, which is why we're recording this, which I'll forget. We are sharing this to people who couldn't attend, who just want basic information. Any questions that pop up after we leave, feel free to email those and we'll shoot those out, shoot the answers out. But during the course of the afternoon, if there's anything, you know, what do they say? The only dumb question is the one that isn't asked. You know, it's easy when you work in something day in and day out, you assume that everyone knows what you're talking about. So if something is like, what are you talking about? Just say, you know, clarify please. So any questions at all, which is why I like the small room, because I think it leads to better dialogue and conversation, so. On that note, I will turn it over
Yeah.
to Paul.
So, just a high level agenda, talk about the CPF, talk about what we expect from BEAD, and then talk a little bit about workforce development. Reiterate what Leslie was saying, SCEDD is a economic development district, and we can send you these slides afterwards. SCEDD is encompassing the 13 counties in southeast Colorado, different councils of government and administrative entities kind of all within the SCEDD umbrella, looking at projects regionally instead of just by county or by municipality, to see if we can, bring together a lot more people to the table and be more competitive on these projects. SCEDD is Broadband Community Readiness Certified by the CBO, and part of that was developing a plan. So when Ditesco first started working with SCEDD, we did the broadband blueprint where we characterized the state of broadband in SCEDD's region using different data sets, identified areas where it was lacking, created a broadband team, and then with SCEDD's board being Board of County Commissioners, we have those good government administrative contacts. And so all of that together kind of came into a broadband community ready broadband. I forget what they called it exactly, but
That's great.
it's certified.
We're one of those.
Yeah, we're one of those. the CBO really was like, it was just a way for the CBO to say like, SCEDD has put in the work and they're ready to do grant applications. So that was kind of the first step, and then we approached the CPF, learned some, won some, and we'll continue hopefully to roll that lessons learned through BEAD.
So just real quickly, Paul, for those that don't know in the room, the blueprint study that was done as far as the broadband capability of the region really set the stage for being able to translate the need for further broadband deployment in the region in partnership with ISPs, et cetera. And so that blueprint then set the stage for the projects being informed into the CPF fund, and then now further into the BEAD program.
Which kind of excites me a little bit, having been in this field, community and economic development for decades. Nothing irritates me more than when you pay for, develop, and have a plan, and then it just dies and nothing is done with it. So I think we're getting a really good bang for our buck, using that plan, and we will use it until we run it dry.
Or everyone's connected.
Well, the connectivity is so important
Oh,
for
everything.
networking, business, you name it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is just a summary of the capital project fund. So there was I think originally 160 million, and other parts of that fund were siphoned off for other projects, and eventually we got 113 million available for projects or awarded to projects. There was 643 million in applications requested across 112 projects. So very competitive. And yeah, SCEDD was able to pull in around 12 million in that grant funding. So around 10% of the total state bucket, which is pretty good. This map just shows the distribution of projects that were awarded across the state. You see the three projects that were awarded to SCEDD were in Bantotero County, Pueblo County, and then up north in Lake County. And so part of this, I know you guys probably know, or two of the three you guys audience knows. The way SCEDD approached it, SCEDD's not a broadband service provider. After the blueprint was published, SCEDD issued a request for partnership with ISPs to propose on projects for the capital project fund. So SCEDD competitively reviewed bids, selected partners, and then approached projects that we thought would be most competitive based on the grant guidelines. It wasn't just one metric of like how many houses can you serve with the amount of money we're going to give you. The CBO kind of took this project. There were a lot of different ways that they ranked projects and compared them to each other to select the ones that ultimately ended up winning. We did look at projects across every county in SCEDD's region, and there was limited bandwidth on what we could apply for, and we ended up selecting the ones that we thought would be most competitive out of all of them. So I think these next slides here, so this is a summary of the projects we ended up submitting. So 7 projects with a total cost of $46 million to connect 4,600 locations. This cost per location is kind of a key metric that I'll come back to a couple times throughout the presentation. Our average cost per location was $9,300. So that kind of gives you a sense of how expensive these projects really are. And then the ISP partners that we submitted these grants on were able to bring over $10 million to the table for match, which is that's a significant amount of money to be able to bring to the table for these projects.
This was 25% match, right?
Yes, yeah. So all these counties are 25% match. Same thing for BEAD. It's all 25% match. So the grant covers 75% of the project cost, and then you have to cover the rest.
I should probably, thinking, So there was a project awarded, CPF funds were awarded a project in Warrenville County, with Jay. John, do you know more about the
I think it's in
project?
Navajo Ranch.
Okay.
Yeah, I can show you on the next slide.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is a summary of the projects that were awarded. 16 million total project, so 12 million in grant funding, 4 million to match, to connect 1,400 homes. Yeah, so this is CPF eligibility. So across, I'm going to show a couple of maps throughout this presentation. They're all color coded the same, but they just serve different information. So green means ineligible for grant funding or served, which is the same as ineligible for grant funding. Orange is underserved, red is unserved. And the definition of that comes from the Colorado Broadband Office in the bottom right. Unserved is you have speeds that are less than 25.3. Underserved is speeds less than 120. So the FCC requires that broadband service providers report the location or report the service availability that they offer to each location. So each dot is a home or a business, and by law, ISPs have to report what they advertise to that location. And using that data, they produce information like this, where they can show who's served, who they're served by, and then who isn't served, and then that informs how they can apportion broadband funding. So as you can see in the town of Walsenburg is fairly well served, so there's a lot of green. Maps like this, it's kind of hard to get a sense of scale. You have a big distribution of orange and red, kind of in the rural areas, obviously around Gardner. But then, the vast majority of the population is centered under that Walsenburg star, and under Levita and Kuchara. So those three locations are well served, and that's what makes up 51% of the ineligible locations. But then further out, you get into the unserved and underserved, so grant eligible locations. And the CPF project that was awarded was this pocket of red, that Navajo Ranch for Jade. They've spent a good amount of time, getting over. Or they're in Levita. They went up to Kuchara, so those two areas are well served, and then they'll be able to extend up towards Walsenburg in that Navajo Ranch area. I forget how much that project cost. I think they were around $12,000 per passing for their award. This next slide kind of shows the summary of work that we did with Highline. At the very beginning with the broadband blueprint that we did when we characterized the state and the area, we saw that there was a large amount of unserved, underserved locations, in the Huerfano, Custer, Fremont area. And we iterated through probably 6 or 7 different versions of a network with Highline to try and come up with something that was sustainable and was a broad enough reach to have a good business case. So this map here, the blue line shows kind of the distribution network that was planned after several iterations. So this is kind of the final product that we ended up with, the best case scenario. So optimizing all that, we had around 3,000 passings. We were around $12,000 per passing, which is in the ballpark. It's expensive, but it's in the ballpark of where we needed to be. But in the end, looking at economic metric and just the overall cost of building and then operating this network, we ended up deciding that it wasn't going to be sustainable. The average revenue that they would gain from this network would be too low to break even on their operating costs. So we ended up not applying for it. And I think that's happened in this area before, and will continue to. So we're going to need to figure out a way to build in this area a BEAD program. And I'm sure that'll be definitely, a lot of people are looking at it. This area is, relatively speaking, there's a lot of unserved in this area. Where Gardner especially, that town comes up a lot. So this kind of summarizes, we did a fair amount of work to try to figure this out, and in the end, unfortunately couldn't make it work, so we didn't submit.
That was a hard one to cut bait on.
Yeah, just because you can't afford to roll out all this cable if you only have so many subscribers paying for service, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can build it, but even if you build it, you would be operating it at a loss.
At a loss.
Yeah, just because of the 25% match, you get depreciation on that.
Yeah.
It gets real expensive quick, and then if any of that was gonna be on the state right away, CDOT now has a per foot charge that they're charging. There's actually legislation to try and shut that down, but, it makes it real expensive then to operate.
Yeah, and the highway, a lot of the area, the highway is the only way to get up to the area, so there's
Sure.
really not any other option, unfortunately. So, I think that's all. Here's a distribution of the cost per location across the awarded projects for the capital project fund. So, it ranged from most expensive at $30,000 a passing down to the least expensive at $3,000 per passing. That $30,000 number comes from a project. There was like 22, 24 homes passed, so it was kind of overall it was relatively smaller. But you can see, these projects are not cheap. The average cost per location was $11,800. In this area, I kind of just took the projects neighboring Huerfano, and the average cost per premise was around $10,000, $97.85. So we'll use that later on by looking at the number of eligible locations for BEAD and then doing like a cost estimate.
Per location, does that mean per residence?
Per residence or business, it's those
Okay.
dots really. So the FCC creates this location data set, and then ISPs report which one of those locations they serve and with what service. The FCC
Parameters
creates
per
the
premise, sure.
location, and then the ISPs report availability. Expected timeline here for the capital project fund. So awards were announced January 3rd. There's a brief challenge period. So we're through that now. The CDO recently on Friday gave SCEDD the contracts to start negotiating. So that's good. So we've been reviewing that. Expect that to happen here in Q1. So once that's done, SCEDD will be able to do the same with the ISP partners. Get that all planned, and then hopefully we can hit the ground running with design, procurement, permitting, and then start to build. And once the contract with SCEDD is signed, we have 2 years from that date to finish and offer service to all locations. And then I've got the December 31st, 2026 is a hard cutoff of the funding. So if you run past the 2-year window and you still need a little more time, you can theoretically, but if you go to the December 31st, 2026, the funding stops and you can't get any more refunded costs. So I think the CBO is trying to push these projects to be done sooner than later so that they don't have to hit that deadline. Yeah, nothing to it, but a lot of construction.
A lot of construction. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's all I had for CPF. Questions, comments, concerns? Cool. So now we'll get into the big one: broadband equity, access, and deployment BEAD. I'm gonna say it again. So
I know, and maybe
Access,
it'll
deployment.
sink into this.
So this is the $826 million to connect 99% of homes and businesses. This 99% has been talked about quite a bit through the governor's office, and it's definitely, it seems like it's a major goal that they're after. We'll see how it pans out. We'll kind of talk about project costs and the available funding and how that might work. So timeline here, January 8th of this year, they released their eligible location list, and that's what I made with. I used to make the maps on the next slides. Same color code, red, green, orange. There was a 30-day location eligibility challenge that just closed, where ISPs, they're operating and they're adding on and modifying their networks constantly, so the availability to the locations changes. So on the end of the challenge window, they're freezing the data set and saying, okay, here's the picture of broadband in Colorado. I incorporated challenges that people said, say we're in this building and CCOM wasn't here, the owner of the building could submit a challenge and say, hey, I'm not served by CCOM, and then they can flip the point of this building to be unserved and make it grant eligible. So that kind of that process happened across the whole state. So they've locked that in. They have the data now, and so they're working together to and consolidate the challenges with the availability and finalize the data set. That's going to be the data that we use to bid on for projects and they award money to. So through that process, right now we're doing the SCEDD broadband roadshows where we want to go out and explain all this stuff, collecting anecdotes from the community about broadband. You know, if I live in Avondale and I couldn't take my kid couldn't do their homework at home because the internet's bad, so we had to go to like McDonald's from the parking lot. That kind of story is powerful that we can use in grant narratives, and we did. So collecting that kind of information from the community can go a long way in our grant applications. So we definitely look for that. If there's any stories or anything, send that our way, and we can incorporate that. So after we'll get this through. We're in the March and April timeframe. We're planning to do a repeat of the request for partnership with broadband service providers. This isn't to say that we were unhappy with what we did, but it's kind of like we were successful for CPF. We want to emulate that with B to make sure if there's other people out there that want to try, give them another opportunity at it. So planning to kind of do take lessons learned and do kind of a repeat similar process of okay, here's the eligibility. What do you want to build? Here's SCEDD has a blueprint that shows where broadband is lacking. We also have this data set that shows where broadband funding is available. How can we make more projects out of this? So planning to have that started and finished hopefully in the March-April timeframe. In the April-May timeframe, the broadband office is going to publish their final eligibility locations. I don't expect it to change very much from what they've already released. So we're kind of base what we do off of this more or less. But yeah, once that data comes out, we can start locking in final project boundaries. In the summer of 24, expecting the application process to open, and then hopefully in the Q1 of 2025, the post-application review process will happen and we'll have awards announced. So hopefully this time next year, we'll be doing another one of these with a bunch more broadband money. If we can get $82 million, 10% of that.
Okay.
Then you just gotta come up with a match.
Okay, yeah,
Which is
okay.
tricky in some of these rural counties,
Absolutely.
for sure, just because, Werfenau operates on 6 to 7 million per year county budget, so it's pretty limited.
You
And
talk
that's
about
grants and
match,
stuff.
what when we talk about lessons learned and moving forward, again, having done this for seems like forever, there's nothing that drives me nuts more than waiting until the last minute to submit a grant application, right, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
He knows how I would tell everybody I need it by Wednesday, but we don't have to do it. No, we need it by Wednesday. So that's one of the reasons why we're gonna start our RFP. That was one of our lessons learned, is let's do this, let's get our partners lined up, let's solidify this, let's get it going, let's start planning, so when that window does open, then we can, Paul did a fantastic job of putting our 7 apps together, but really, I think this is my sense, I think people held back on applying for CPF. I think they were holding out for BEAD. So I think this will be just as competitive, and Paul will show some numbers.
Yeah.
But that's one of the lessons learned. Match, and I think I'm stealing your thunder.
Oh yeah, we'll get in, using the eligible locations. I think I might have it here on the next slide. Oh, this is just comparison.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a big lesson learned. And that's kind of what, part of this. If a county can provide matching funds, that will go a long way. The CPF projects we submitted, the match was all provided by the ISP partner and SCEDD. But yeah, if to win $82 million, or I just throw out there because it's 10%. To win any amount of money, a lot of match is going to be required. And so yeah, any amount of money that counties can provide will help improve broadband in their community.
I do think that, and I may be talking out of, wouldn't be the first time, probably won't be the last time, but I think, given time, I think that there are some ways that we could come up with, given time with the counties, where it may not necessarily be cash, but can we do some sort of in-kind or arrangements or waivers or something, but those, you know how counties are. Any county, any government entity, you got a poster hearing, you've got to have your, your meeting, And so it's hard to do things on a, hey, let's sit down, talk about this, make a decision, boom. We can't necessarily do that when we're talking about government, so that's one of the reasons why I wanna get this, so we have time to sit and talk through these things logically and come up with the best solution possible with the resources that we all have available. So, that's my dream. I say this before I start any big project, and I guarantee you, the day before these applications are due, I'm still gonna be scrambling looking for stuff.
We submitted like 3 or 4 days earlier.
We did.
Yeah, and
We
thank
did.
goodness because the
Yes.
portal crashed.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
See?
we'll be doing that again.
I
or
knew.
earlier. Definitely. So this map just shows a comparison between CPF eligibility and BEAD eligibility. So not much has changed really. There may be some more orange and green. Actually, sorry, the north part of Huerfano, there's a large ACAM, another federal project. So these locations turn to ineligible funded, which is a good thing. You know, there's federal funding available to connect those homes and businesses to fiber. So yeah, not much has changed. You know, we'll expect to see on this first BEAD eligibility, they did not include the CPF award because it was still in the challenge period. So all of these locations will turn to green funded. But yeah, you get up northwest of Walsenburg, it stays the same. It's still eligible, underserved, and unserved. So yeah, here's a breakdown. 57% ineligible, but still quite a bit of underserved and unserved. And we got a little bit less than half of eligible locations here in the county. Anything that looks surprising there?
No, I see where, that's your rural, and of course, you got the interstate corridor with a lot of green there.
Yeah. So yeah, here's a little cost breakdown. So that 2,364 eligible locations for BEAD multiplied by the average cost per passing, $9,700, come up with $23 million for total estimated project cost for Huerfano County. Times 75% grant funding. So the actual project, the grant award to the county would be $17 million, and a match requirement would be almost $6 million. So that's a significant
Well, that
investment.
falls under that.
It's the county's budget.
That was 1 year.
I'm sure everyone will work for free and drive on crappy roads.
Nobody needs any
We
gravel
just
roads.
need like a 25%
Yeah,
discount.
take it real slow on the roads. We'll make it last. Yeah. So I also did a breakdown of there's 185,000 eligible locations in Colorado. 1.3% of those locations are in Huerfano County. So multiply that 1.3% times the 826 million, you come out with $10,500,000 or $10,500,000 available. Potentially just like apportioning the money out by percentage for Huerfano. But we estimate a project cost, which is probably conservative, of $17 million. So there's definitely a discrepancy in available funding versus what we think would be needed to build out in this county. And it's that way across the state. If you just take 826 million and divide it by 185,000 eligible locations, you come out with around $4,500 per location, per eligible location, which is less than half of what you would expect it to actually cost. And some of those, like in Eagle County, they were $3,000 a location, but that was a mobile home park. Others, like in Larimer County, were $30,000 a location. So there's definitely a distribution that we'll see. The broadband office is expecting to, at some point they'll do a extremely high cost per passing threshold, and above that they'll allow non-fiber projects to be funded. But below that, they expect it to be fiber everywhere. But I think, the rural areas of Huerfano will probably qualify for that extremely high cost per passing threshold, and then be able to do some kind of fiber wireless solution there. So I'll explain this slide to you if you don't mind.
Thank you.
So we're just looking at the BEAD eligible locations. So in Huerfano County, there's 2,300 eligible locations.
Mhm.
This $9,700 is the average cost per location for the CPF awards that were awarded around Huerfano.
Mhm.
So multiplying those two together, we come up with 23 million in total estimated project costs to connect all these homes in Huerfano.
Mhm.
The BEAD program has a 75% match. So, or sorry, I said that wrong. It's a
Yeah.
25% match. So the BEAD, for a $23 million project, BEAD would award 17 million, and we would need to come up with almost 6 million in match. So for SCEDD's CPF project, SCEDD provided some match. ISPs provided the vast majority of the match. But this is going to be an issue, across the state. And we were talking for you in here that any amount of funding that can be saved by the county can potentially be used for match, and that would help a lot, going a long way here. And just looking at statewide,
Where can that match come from? Can it come from other grants that might be available, or?
If they're not federal grants.
Oh, okay.
So we can't match, this is federal money,
Mhm.
so we can't match like rural development or EDA, we can't use federal sources to match it, but we could use state or foundation money.
Mhm.
So if OED, DOLA, we could use their money as match.
Okay.
We did for CPF, this is what I alluded to earlier, none of the 3 counties that were awarded projects contributed to those projects. It was all, thank you, CCOM, and Vero in Lake County, but they provided millions of dollars worth of match, cash and in kind.
it was like 10, I don't know, 2 million?
About 3 million for
3 million
CCOM,
match?
yeah.
Now,
So some of it can come from
in kind.
DOLA, some can come in
Yes.
kind.
Mhm.
Yeah, I did hear they may take away the in-kind.
Yep.
They
And that
had some
wouldn't surprise
challenges
me.
with how people were doing that, but we need to petition them to say, give better definitions for what's allowed and what's not allowed, so that there's no confusion over it. But again, that's the in-kind is what makes some of this work in these rural areas.
Right. Yeah.
For us, when we've got employees that we're gonna be keeping working there in projects, and if we can count that as in-kind, that goes a long way.
Well, and I think when you look at the competitive nature of BEAD, if you put yourself in CBO's chair, and if you're looking at 2 applications, in one application, there's cash from, the ISP and our in-kind.
Right.
That which all we did is just said we'll just take a hit on paying,
Right.
for project admin. Or you have another application where you have some from the ISP, and then you have, maybe a third of the 25% of cash from the county or a city, or who really wants it more.
Yeah.
It just sends a good message, but yet, we know our counties are cash strapped.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we just had layoffs galore
Yeah.
here in Huerfano County. County layoffs.
Yeah.
Not business layoffs, county layoffs.
Lots of them.
Lots of,
11, was it?
Huh?
11 people laid off?
in one,
Then
in
there's
one
another
wave,
round
there
of
was
them
another
coming.
wave. Yeah,
We know that.
and it's those
And-
counties who need it
I
the
know.
most, because the only way these counties can recover is to have internet and housing. That's it.
I do think CBO knows this.
Uh-huh.
They know, the state knows, everybody knows. We were allowed to do match waivers through CPF. They said no for BEAD, but I find that hard to believe how they can hurt that many of its rural counties. So I don't know. And that's always been a and Keith, I know, and Paul have heard me say this till I'm blue in the face, I will do whatever I can to reduce the kick to the gut to the counties. I will do whatever I can. So far, so good. I haven't had to beg for money yet. Not very good at it either.
Who oversees, like, is it legislature in Colorado, or who is the operating body that, is it a group within legislature, or?
Not really, it's all driven by the federal, by NTIA, who was the recipient of or who's doling out the money for this infrastructure law.
And I think it's actually in federal statute that it's a 25% match.
And
So
this-
the people back in these high density areas, they don't have a clue. I was literally right before I came here, I was on a meeting, a Zoom call with a lady that lives in Washington DC, and she asked, well, what's it like out there? And I said, well, I just drove about 70 something miles, and there's a good chunk of it, you can go 10, 15 miles.
Yeah.
You don't even see a house, much less even a jackrabbit. And she goes, you're kidding me? I said, no. There's some of these areas I can take you out there where literally we could take you from Trinidad to Kim, and you may see one or two vehicles. I passed one vehicle on the whole way there.
I almost dropped Mr. Smarty Pants off in the middle.
Yeah, they don't have a clue of how rural it is out
It is
there.
very rural.
I know that during COVID, there was money coming down in the form of grants to companies to help small communities, poor communities, whatever, learn how to use computers.
Yeah.
And so there was a company out of Los Angeles, totally disconnected, that said, well, we're just going to buy a bunch of Chromebooks. We're going to give them away, and people, with the stipulation that you have to go through a lesson on how to use the Chromebook and what's the internet and blah, 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 and then we'll just give them away to businesses in rural areas. Problem is, a Chromebook has no memory. What people want out in the country is something with memory, so I can go out in my pickup truck out in the middle of God knows where and put all my data in, and then when I get back to the office I can, but they said, well, we'll just hook up to Wi-Fi.
I got your Wi-Fi.
So I have 4 Chromebooks in my drawer because the ranchers are like, no and hell no. How's this supposed to work? I said,
Oh, we're gonna talk about that at the end of you'll like my speech.
yeah.
But, no, my hope by and yes, this is set by statute, I mean, the feds are the feds are the feds, there's no arguing with Washington, but this is a priority for the governor. One would hope that he would find a way to, he's done it with CPF, where he could carve some money, move something somewhere to help offset some of that match.
Yeah. Well, I think what has to happen is that the Front Range needs to understand that their workforce is moving south to affordable, open areas. When they see, if they could understand that their workforce is now working from here and their success is based upon us, but how do you make them understand that?
It's kind of this sounds kind of harsh. I deal a lot with the legislature and that's part of my role with CCOM. They'll flat out tell you, we don't care. You choose to live out. I literally had a guy from Highlands Ranch several years ago, a representative say, you people choose to live out there, that's your problem. That was his response.
When he first uttered the word "you people," I think I would have.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
One thing I took out of the slides, but it was in the Colorado Broadband Office's plan, was that in any area across the state, and so actually before I say that, I'll preface it with, doing the math here, 1.3% of eligible locations in Huerfano multiplied by the amount of funding available is 10.5 million. We estimate, 17 million, somewhat conservatively, probably for the county. So taking what I'm about to say with this big grain of salt, this broadband office will look across the state after all the applications have been submitted and look for areas that are still unserved and underserved and didn't have any projects awarded. And they've said that they're going to look at nearby ISPs and work with them in a non-competitive grant agreement to build to those unserved and underserved locations. So while there is obviously a big shortfall in funding available, theoretically the broadband office will see, like, you know, if no one is able to make a sustainable business case work for the Gardner area, for example, the broadband office will partner with an ISP in the area and work with them to try and build to there. So, you know, the funding is short, but they have said that they're going to try and do that. They're going to try and connect to all the homes, even if no one applies competitively to build to that. But you know, they can't force it to happen either. So.
Well, in the case of Highlands, just because the governor's office or the state comes in and says, hey, we're gonna make this work and do a non-competitive grant, it's still not gonna get, it's
Yeah, you can't force
still
them
not
to
gonna
operate
work,
on
yeah.
loss. But you know, the opportunity will be there for the competitive process, and then the post-competitive process will still try and make it work, however possible.
How this worked in the telecom over the last number of years, it was the smaller rural areas like this were actually subsidized. And
Yeah.
there still are a few telecoms in the state that are subsidized. There's actually a bill for review, sunset review, that they're probably gonna renew, but it's still, because they got 50 people on this whole phone system, and it costs hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to provide them basic phone service out there. And so they get subsidized.
You think that might be an operating model for BEAD?
It might. I've actually heard, at least the idea has been kicked up there. It's like maybe some of these very rural areas, there may need to be a program like that for ISPs out in these extreme rural areas.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you're operating at a loss, but there's vast swaths of unserved people.
Yes.
That would be the
So if they would come out with something like that could benefit.
Well, think about it, I probably shouldn't call anybody out, who in this room has a landline?
I still do, because I live about 10 miles out of town, and it can be really spotty out there. So we still have a landline out there.
I live right in the middle of town, I have one.
Why?
Because I want one. Because I'm conservative and old and.
God, come on, Keith, even
I
my
don't trust these
husband is
things.
caved.
What's interesting, so ours is a Century. It goes out anytime it rains. Ours goes out.
Oh, I thought the rain would make it better.
It's underground. There's a place that it gets wet and it shorts out. They've not been able to fix it for probably 20 years. So I will get fiber to my house on this one project. So we're gonna I'll have a landline through
Is that
CCOM
why
on
you
there.
were so?
It's like, we've gotta get Big County in there.
Nice.
Well,
I need a
think
landline that works.
It used to be that you had to have, back in the, you had to have a phone. I mean, that was your lifeline, that was your landline. Now, some of the more progressive people in this world, so more and more people are getting rid of their landline and going just with mobile.
Yes.
So what would make that any different than, that was the point I was trying to
Yeah.
make,
I'm
but
just saying that the old copper lines will still work without power.
this is true,
My VoIP will not.
this is true. Yeah,
Got a UHF radio.
you will laugh.
All right,
you will-
Paul, let's move through these slides. Just go backwards quick.
We're digressing.
So that's what we had for BEAD and CPF. Any more questions, comments, concerns? I think we beat that horse.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, the takeaway from that is, we will be looking at back, taking another look. We had a good project, we still have a good project, we need to refine it.
Multiple good projects.
Yeah.
And we'll be looking forward to reconnecting with the ISPs for more partnerships through the RFP, RFI process, but.
And again, that's not to say, oh God, the people we were working with were horrible, we want all new, that's certainly not the case. We just wanna make sure we get the work done. So, you can just copy paste.
I do think though that the call for additional local match, especially with these broader, bigger BEAD program projects, is gonna be critical for success. I think your message that you sent in the last session, this one's well received, should be well received by the local community. Yeah, I mean, it would be great to see the counties kind of partner with some of the cities in the region and develop a plan to fund some local match for a regional solution. I think that would be fantastic if they could do that. Even if it's just a couple $1 million, you know, across a larger swath of ground, that's gonna go a long way from a local match.
I think, and that's what I was kind of pushing for last year, it didn't play out this way with this roundabout of CPF apps, but if we have, just hypothetically, this project that had Custer, Fremont, Huerfano counties, wouldn't it be magical to take that match requirement and split it between, probably not even Stephen, between the three entities, but be able to spread that, it's less of a hit.
Yeah.
Or if and I'm not even talking factually here, but if there's a project that affects both in Huerfano County that affects Walsenburg and Gardner, well, why not county ask Walsenburg and Gardner for some of those match funds, proportionately, you know, not so no one's, you know, running a water system but enough, cause they're all gonna benefit. And given the grace of time, we'll be able to work through some of those things, which is why I wanna get moving.
Well, let's be creative with our project selection too,
Yes.
how it's scoped. Let's get fiber places. Maybe we can't get to every premise, but let's get it to places that can maybe support fixed wireless or other technologies that serve the majority of people.
There's some real good fixed wireless. We have one right now that we're running 400 megs on.
Yeah.
Which again, is that perfect? No, it's not it might be a 10-year solution, I don't know. But it's gonna get a good 5 to 7 year at least solution. And in the meantime,
That's
maybe
symmetrical, you're getting 400 megs
Yeah.
symmetrical, yeah, I mean that's fantastic for rural use.
exactly, we're getting about 5 to 6 miles out of it, so it's a decent range.
Yep.
So for a tower,
Yeah, we can put up a tower, and it doesn't have to be a real tall tower, because you're not covering that big of an area, as long as you can get a high point. There's even some less expensive stuff, we're easily doing 100 megs, 100 plus megs to people's houses. We've got one out, close to one of the areas that we got awarded here. We got 1 or 2 employees on it, and it's working really well. So again, there's a number of options. We can get people that are extremely rural, we can get that cost down with customer permit equipment, the stuff that goes to the house.
Yep.
You know, it's literally hundreds of dollars versus, net cost of all of the equipment, thousands of dollars to get the equipment hooked up. We can do it for hundreds of dollars and get them a decent bandwidth. At least it's something better than nothing.
Yeah, but it's those solutions that are gonna make it successful.
Yes, and at some point, if you've got a fiber line out there, eventually you can start branching off
Yep,
that. You
yep.
can spider off of it then.
At least you got a backbone.
You got a backbone through there.
Well, I was dragging my feet waiting for Mary Jo.
Sorry.
No, you're
I still like to run business.
So, BEAD has 3 different buckets or components to it. There's, our connectivity, or you took it down.
Broadband equity access.
So that'd be deployment. Which is, you know, the bulk of what we have been talking about, getting fiber to the home.
Excuse me, just.
She's just gonna message. There's also the equity piece, which is ensuring that not only do all 99% of the residences have access to broadband, but that people can afford that broadband or afford the internet, and also know how to use it. So using Mary Jo's, that's a perfect example, and we've been around the block with someone who wants to donate a bunch of computers to it. It's like, well, that's another story. But so that's the equity piece. Probably not as highly funded as the other pieces, but just as critical. Then there's also the workforce piece. Oops, I'm gonna start, and I told these guys I'd let them do the yakking about this. But, so you'll have to help me because I don't have the numbers right in front of me. So a while ago, in conversations with the Colorado Broadband Office, this is where I speak to Highline and CCOM too, where I try and coerce them a little bit. Are you coercible? Maybe.
You can coerce me, but I don't have a lot of say.
I know, right? Take the message.
I will take the message. I'm really good at taking messages.
So we were, Michael Murphy from the CBO and we were talking, just, and I said, good God, this is a lot of work, a lot of, you know, all these dollars, somebody has to do the work. Who's gonna do all this work? And every state is getting this money. So it's not like we can get workers in New Mexico or Kansas or wherever to come and do this work because they're just as busy where they are. So we started talking, then he said, you know, there's this workforce development component of BEAD. We also at SCEDD started thinking, you know, this is workforce in the construction field is an issue. There is a need and will be a very dramatic need once all these projects are funded. But we also have one other that I can think of, construction related issue that's present in the state and across the country, and that's housing. So why don't we SCEDD focus on a workforce development training project in the field of construction to train people up rather quickly, get them in the construction field so they can do the work on these CPF and BEAD funded projects, as well as maybe carry over into developing or building affordable housing. Perfect. So if only people would just listen to me say that and then give me money to do it, it would be fantastic. But so we've been working at SCEDD on developing a program using a bunch of different resources, but one is using our higher ed, the local community colleges, a little bit of on-the-job training. We are working have had significant talks with the apprenticeship office, trying to design a program where we can identify unemployed or underemployed local people who will train up, get their certificates, get what they need to move into employment with local employers. Our hope and dream is that the construction company who may be limited by the number of people they know working for them here in Walsenburg, that we can funnel some qualified people to work for them, whether it's a heavy equipment operator or an electrician or a plumber or whomever. They can go to work for that company. Voila, that company's now in a position where they can bid on these jobs, these local jobs by local companies will help the local companies grow.
Is this the broadband?
You bet your bottom dollar it
I
is.
know nothing about it, but can I listen?
Yeah, 'cause
I'm up in Colorado Springs and they're digging up everything to put in cable.
well, join us.
I thought I'd tell you that.
Have a
So,
seat.
just a few minutes?
Yeah, come on in.
Where's there another
Go
seat?
ahead, sir. There is. We have littles.
Yeah,
Something in work.
You know what they say, sinners in the rear.
there's no one here from the,
But
there's no one here from Walsenburg?
Just me, your county commissioner
Oh,
candidate.
all right.
Travis.
Travis.
In Werfenau County, you have the highest unemployment in the state of Colorado. You also have about 1